Welcome to today's session of our overview webinar series. My name is Dimple and I'm the servant leader at INDICA Courses. INDICA Courses is a pioneering edtech enterprise from INDICA in the Indigenous Knowledge Systems domain. We create and curate online courses across multiple IKS disciplines for lifelong learners who share our belief in the transformative power of timeless Indigenous wisdom. We offer both self-paced pre-recorded courses and cohort courses that involve online sessions. The courses are conducted on our learning portal. You can find out more about INDICA courses on our website, indica.courses. And you can also follow us on our social media to stay updated about our upcoming courses and other offers on scholarships and grants. This particular overview webinar series has been created as an interface for prospective learners to understand what a particular INDICA course would offer so that they can make an informed enrollment decision. We have organized quite a few sessions in the last few months, and you can watch the recordings of those sessions on INDIC Academy's YouTube channel. I shall share the link in the chat box so that you can catch up on the same. Today's webinar is about the ongoing INDICA course on integral well-being, where our erudite faculty, Srimati Nitya Jagannathan, shall take you through the details of the same. The modern era of technology that we inhabit offers manifold benefits such as improved quality of living, opportunities in professional growth, etc. But it also comes with a flip side. Longer working hours and the electronic leash of devices that we all seem to be tethered to take a toll on health and wellness. In an uncertain geopolitical world riddled with financial insecurities, stress, anxiety, and depression are on the rise worldwide. It is with this background that we thought of curating the specific INDICA course. This INDICA course on integrated well-being weaves together Indian philosophy, approaches to understanding holistic wellness, and guided practices of asana, pranayama, mantra, and bhavana, along with fundamental Ayurvedic insights on preventive and promoting health, so that we are able to face challenges from a position of strength and awareness instead of mere vulnerability. Before I invite Nitya Jagannathan ji to take us through the contours of the course, I would like to introduce you to her. Or rather, I would like to introduce her to you all. Nitya Jagannathan ji is the director of Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, KYM Institute of Yoga Studies, trained in Vedic chanting. She is a CIAYT, ERYT 500 and YACEP. I would request her to let us know what these acronyms stand for. She has a professional experience of more than 18 years. Nitya ji is the editor-in-chief of KYM's quarterly e-journal on yoga and yoga chikitsa. She's a life member of the Indian Yoga Association and a member of the Standing Academic Accreditation Committee of the Indian Yoga Association. She is also a Bharatnatyam dancer, teacher, and choreographer with many awards to her credit. Nitya ji has traveled extensively representing the KYM Institute at numerous events, seminars, and workshops across the world. Welcome, Nitya ji. We are so privileged to have you today with us. Kindly take us through the course.
Thank you. Namaskaram, Dimple ji. Thank you to INDICA also for hosting this session. And namaskaram to all the attendees. Let me start with an invocation before I move on to an overview of this course. We have had just a couple of sessions of this integral wellness course. Nevertheless, I think as Dimple ji said, the INDICA has a remarkable learning management system whereby course content is accessible for up to a year. And so therein the reason behind this introductory talk. One thing that I'd like to possibly state at the beginning is that what I'm presenting today is just an overview of ideas that will be covered. In fact, there is much more than these slides contain. And some of these slides actually become content for almost entire sessions of 90 minutes each. And so given the nature, the scope, and the diversity that I'm trying to bring in, where we're trying to link at one side Ayurveda, Yoga, and Vedantic principles, Upanishadic fundamental ideas, along with practices of yoga fundamentally. But within that, in the KYM approach, we try to integrate various tools, not just asana, but asana, pranayama, mantra, bhavana, nyasam. There are other, you could say, ancillary tools such as tirtha yatra and certain rituals, certain samskaras that may be adopted, and so on. And so it is a course that is designed to layer some philosophical content with some theoretical content, some factual content, you could say, from an Ayurvedic perspective with practices, so that some of these are experienced. And the structure of the course is such that one is required to reflect. There is some amount of a reflective component whereby one can see how these factors impact and inform our life and the choices that we make. And therefore, because of the nature of today's talk, I may not be able to dwell on each concept very long. The reason being that each of these ideas is unpacked in the course itself. And so my request is that your questions aren't pertaining to the expansion of that content, because we simply do not have the time in this session. That said, I'll move on to my presentation.
Thank you.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhanvantraye Amrita Kalashahastaya Sarva Amaya Vinashanaya Trailokyanataya Shri Mahavishnave Namaha. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi abahu purushakaram शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं श्रीमते अनन्ताय नागराजाय नमो नमः। लक्ष्मीनारायणसमारम्भां नाथयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। श्रीकृष्णवागीशयतीश्वराभ्यां सम्प्राप्तचक्राङ्कणभाष्यसारम् श्रीनूत्नरङ्गेन्द्रयतौ समर्पितस्वं श्रीकृष्णमार्यं गुरुवर्यमीडे। विरोधे कार्तिके मासे शतताराकृतोदयम् योगाचार्यं कृष्णमार्यं गुरुवर्यमहं भजे। कृष्णसूरीदयापात्रं ज्ञानवैराग्यभूषणं श्रीमद्वेङ्कटनाथार्यं वन्देऽहं योगदेशिकम्। Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Integral wellness, integral well-being. This is a question that I think many of us are deeply concerned about. At a surface level, we see that there are great inequities across the world, whether it comes to access to wealth or resources, primary needs, food, shelter, clothing, of course, access to timely, competent medical care. All of these, there are clear inequities that we see. And these only seem to be increasingly perpetuated as the days go by and as our world, I think increasingly we are gravitating to this situation where different kinds of diseases that afflict us in so many ways seem to be the order of the day. I think just coming very soon on the footsteps of COVID. We've been through the pandemic, nearly 3 very tough years, and still we are not through it. And this is just one. But across the world, we also see that across the world, we also see that there is a fairly significant increase in various autoimmune conditions, terminal cancers, and so on. And so, in this context, I think it is important for us to reflect on what we are doing that is wrong. What can we do to revert or to return to an understanding of health and wellness from the roots? And there are many ideas that are layered here, because our tradition, the Bharatiya tradition, is not just rich from the perspective of Sanskriti in terms of culture, but also from the perspective of chikitsa, of healthness, the very idea of what health means, what absence of health indicates, deviation away from arogyam, seen as vyadhi, and what can be done to restore an individual to as much of a state of sustained wellness as possible. And in many such cases, we see that we have systems, remarkably well-developed systems, both yoga, Ayurveda, and various other indigenous systems that hold the individual front and center rather than treating a disease. What they treat, what they attempt to work with is the person, the individual as a whole. And this is something that my teacher, Shridhesikachar, would always tell us when he was training us in yoga therapy, that he would always tell us, you cannot prescribe a protocol for diabetes, a yoga protocol. You can't say, do these asanas for back pain, or these asanas for hypertension, or these asanas for diabetes, or whatsoever. He would say, ask the question, who has diabetes? Who has hypertension? Only when you understand the total can you deal with the symptoms. Now, I would say this is a fundamental understanding in our approach to an integrated model of wellness, where necessarily we'll have to look at health promotive, disease preventive models. Treating a disease after it manifests is one thing. Unfortunately, that's where we are. But according to Ayurveda, by the time a disease has manifest at some level, it has already gone through multiple stages of progression. And therefore, sometimes when we are attempting to treat an ailment is when it has already become fairly acute or critical. If we could just be a little preemptive and try to approach our life choices in terms of ahara, vihara, achara, vichara, 4 pillars, I would say, of our life. Possibly, if we could be preemptive here, try to understand the purpose of our life, the interconnections that we experience between us and others, not just other humans, but the universe as a whole. Therein, there can be several answers, and also more than answers, I would say, to be ill or well is a state of mind. And while in many cases we are not able to cure the disease, healing is still possible, acceptance is possible, management of symptoms is possible, and through that an establishment of good, sustained, reasonably good quality of life can be done. For this, we have to return to the roots. We have to understand what was the vision of the ancient rishis, of our masters. And I would say at the heart of that is this remarkable model of the Samashti and the Vyashti, the remarkable connections that are presented in the Brahmanandavalli, which says that there is the source Brahman, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. That is our goal. That is the purpose for which we are born human. But unfortunately, for us to be able to embark on a journey of inquiry, you need a certain base level of health and wellness. Quality of life needs to be assured, because one can't. Where is the question of seeking when your stomach itself is not full or you don't have a nutritious meal? And therefore, that becomes fundamental, I would say, as a prerequisite. This is also why Patanjali presents Vyadhi as the first antaraya. The illness itself becomes an antaraya to our higher pursuits, especially of the Purusharthas. Because eventually, when you follow the path of Dharma, Artha, Kama, the final destination is moksha, which is realization of our true self, the nature of Brahman. But to go there, we are made up of the five elements. The universe around us is made up of these elements, and there exists a remarkable connection between the outer and the inner worlds. And it is by navigating through these that we can slowly develop the strength of the body, refinement of the mind, and a sense of resolution to move along with Shraddha towards our goal. So this is one part of what we will cover, the model of evolution presented in the Brahmananda Valli, where the human entity is seen as a composite of the Panchabhuta, which in turn from the Bhutas emerge the Oshadhi, the very plants that are the substratum of our nourishment, which in turn become Annam that nourishes us. And so the necessity of seeing the links of the elements and how they impact us, therefore, becomes very important. We see also here, from the perspective of evolution, you see these ideas present in the Sankhya Karika as well, that when we are speaking of the world, we are speaking essentially of Triguna, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And so these elements are not isolated. The three gunas are literally, you could say, the fundamental strands that intertwine, creating all matter. The universe itself is, you could say, in a way, a tapestry of the three strands of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. What are the elements if not a combination of these? And so the evolution of the elements from the subtlest, the rarest space to the grossest earth is also a manifestation of different gunas. There can be Sattva dominance, Rajas dominance, Tamas dominance, but the interplay of the gunas and in the elements and in us, therefore, becomes a very important aspect for us to comprehend. And the understanding of wellness and illness from the perspective of the gunas is also very important, because typically where there is Sattva Guna Pradhanyam, it is associated with a state of wellness, of contentment, tripti, fulfillment. Where typically Rajas is involved and where there is an impact of Tamas, this is where disease conditions start to emerge. And so it is important to see this interplay of the gunas in us as also in the world outside us. Another fundamental, I would say, theoretical concept that is covered in this course is evolution according to the Sankhya Karika, in fair amount of detail. Purusha, Prakriti manifesting further into Buddhi and then into the Ahamkara, and the Asmita or the Ahamkara further birthing the Tanmatras and the Mahabhutas, as also the Manas, Jnanendriyas and the Karmendriyas. And we study in depth the interactions between these, because none of this is random. When you go deeper, you understand the link between Akasha as a Bhuta, the Tanmatra Shabda. Correspondingly, the Jnanendriyas and Karmendriyas within us are the ears and speech and so on. And those connections are seen across these evolutes, which is a very, very beautiful insight that Sankhya gives us. We see that essentially the world is the Panchabhuta. The Panchabhuta are underpinned by the Tanmatras. And naturally, the five elements, the Tanmatras, the Gunas are also constituents of the outer and the inner worlds. And it is this that we speak of as Prakriti. What lies beyond is Purusha or consciousness. And we must remember that while the Gunas are the fundamental building blocks essential for life, they are also, the nature of the Gunas is to be in a state of flux, with each vying for control, for dominance. And our goal that as long as one is embodied, to eliminate Rajas or Tamas is not the point. To sublimate Rajas and Tamas to the dominance of Sattva is what we are looking at from a basic health and wellness perspective. It is even beyond that state that Krishna tells Arjuna, where he says, Nistray Gunyo Bhava Arjuna. It's a transcendent state. It's a state where one supersedes this limitation, this identification with the body, mind, senses complex. But where we are, when I speak of us, I speak collectively at an average level. I'm not speaking of the Rishi or the Jnani or the Yogi or the Tapasvi. For us, in our life situations, bringing in essential quality of life, wellness, sustained stability, contentment, I think these become important. And for that, we need to understand what we can do to ensure a certain dominance of sattva so that rajas and tamas are functional, that they don't become dysfunctional in us. Another important aspect here, essential aspect, I would say, in our understanding is the role played by prana. Because there is the Purusha. You see that there is the cosmic Purusha. Could say the Purushottama, as the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 15 presents it. And there is this universe that is pervaded by prana. Because prana is the firstborn. We see that in the Narayana Upanishad. It says, Atha Purusho Bhavai Narayano Akamayata Prajasrajayeti. When that supreme one decided to manifest, firstborn was prana. Narayana prano jayate. With prana come the elements and the indriyas and so on. And so you see that there is Purusha and prana at a cosmic level, but at the individual embodied level, it is again prana that is the, you could say, the vehicle or the means by which the presence of the Atman is felt. And prana, therefore, is a vital link within us, the link between the body and the mind, facilitated by the breath. And so breath work is very central. Understanding of the work of the breath, understanding how best we can improve the quality of breathings. One of the most fundamental aspects in the teaching of yoga techniques is this. And so the course explores in some amount of detail this connection. Please note here that prana is not only breath. Prana is available to us through the food, through the air, through water, also in our environment itself. And therefore, we are very, very susceptible, very vulnerable to changes in prana. The sangha that we keep, the practices that we follow, all of these can replenish or deplete prana. But a very viable, very accessible or tangible tool that is useful for all of us is the breath. And breath is the key to yoga therapy interventions for health and wellness. We see that in this body, which is the Sharira, it is inhabited by the indweller, the Shariri or the Purusha. Prana is that which emanates simply by the presence of prana, by the presence of the Purusha. It is prana that activates Prakriti, that it is prana that brings in functions of Prakriti in the body. The example that I remember that my teacher has told us often, he would say that if you consider Purusha to be the sun, then prana is verily the rays of that sun, the light of the sun. You can't separate them. And so prana becomes fundamental. Understanding of pranayama and how it can be used again is a remarkable tool. And so here when we're speaking of prana, we explore the ideas of the pancha prana, the upapranas, how these pranas function within us, what causes the smooth flow of prana, what happens when there are blockages in the nadis that inhibit the flow of prana, and how this can lead to situations of disease and so on. So this is another important area that is studied. Further, we also look at the model of the Panchamaya or the Panchakosha. Another, I would say, one of the most precious contributions from the Brahmanandavalli of the Taittiriya Upanishad. I never cease to wonder at the vision of the Rishi who gives us this jewel of understanding. I fully, it is an Upanishadic model. Absolutely, there is a prakriya that is involved, and it's called the Pakshi Kalpana theory, where every dimension of the body, the Purusha is seen as being encompassed or sheathed within 5 dimensions or layers, if you might call it. And the journey, therefore, is to transcend these layers, to understand and to transcend these layers, to be able to realize the truth that is Brahman within. And the approach is a beautiful one, where little by little, the student is led on this journey of seeking, understanding the presence of Brahman in the Annamaya, and then realizing that Annamaya is not, that Brahman is not just Annamaya, though Brahman pervades Annamaya. And from there, the next level of understanding of Brahman as the pervading force in Pranamaya, but Brahman is not equal to Pranamaya, and so on till Anandamaya. And finally, the realization that the truth that we are seeking lies beyond. And therein lies the journey of the Bhriguvalli as well, Brahmanandavalli and Bhriguvalli. Specifically, the Pakshi Kalpana of the Taittiriya Upanishad, the second chapter, envisions each of these dimensions in the form of a bird. And the bird has 5 parts: the head, the torso, 2 wings, and a tail. And every one of these parts is assigned a particular component. What is remarkable is the connection across these components: the Annamaya Sharira, the Pranamaya Sharira comprising the 5 pranas, the Manomaya Sharira comprising the 4 Vedas, and at the core is the Adesha, the instructions that are given that bind these together, the Vijnanamaya Atma comprising Shraddha as the head, Mahat as the tail, with Ritam and Satyam as the wings and Yoga as the core, and the Anandamaya Atma, which has Priyam, Modam, Pramodam as the head, the wings, Ananda Atma, the core being Ananda, and the very source, the tail, being Brahman. And so this is another model that is elaborated, and we also attempt to understand what tools of yoga, ahara, vihara, vichara, can work on these dimensions, because this is where yoga attempts to bridge. In many ways, I would say yoga straddles that midpoint with Ayurveda on the one side and the wealth of Upanishadic wisdom, yoga philosophy on the other. When we bring in yoga therapy models, where tools of yoga are adapted to individual needs, then you find a remarkable template or a model that can be used, that can be applied in so many contexts. In fact, this is the work of the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mantra, which is fundamentally a center, very well-known center for yoga therapy. This is our approach. And therefore, an exploration of all of this, the 5 Panchakosha, and what is it that lies beyond? What is it that keeps this body and all these dimensions functioning? What remains unchanging and constant despite the changes that occur here? And therefore, what is this understanding of wellness? Because the idea being that the more we realize the nature of the Atma within, the more we are anchored in a qualitative wellness, the more we divorce ourselves from this, the more we identify with the external, with the periphery, the more we suffer, the more we are inclined to dukkha. And so this is the philosophy, and we'll see how some of these can be worked on through practices of asana, of pranayama, of bhavana, and so on. Also explored here is the understanding. Again, see, what I'm doing is I may not always focus only on a text. I work with the Yoga Sutra, the Bhagavad Gita, possibly the Shushruta Samhita, certain Upanishads, Sankhya Karika, and various other sources as well. Some of the works of Krishnamacharya and certain other texts on Ayurveda. But wherever possible, my attempt is also to show connections, to indicate connections, because when we look at, say, just the Sankhya Karika teaches us about evolution, it stops there. When you look at Ayurvedic literature, it tells us about how there are disease manifestations at the level of the Jnanendriya, Karmendriya, and the body, and so on. I am attempting also to draw these connections, and so to explain the process of perception, the role of the Chit and the Chitta, which comprises Manas, Ahamkara, Buddhi, as per Yoga Sutra. What does this process of cognition involve? How does cognition happen? When is our perception clouded? What can be done to remove this clouding? Because from a yoga perspective, the clouding of the mind becomes a fundamental problem to be circumvented, and therefore the approach is the removal of the klesha and the arousal of jnana. But for this, necessarily we must understand that body, mind, senses are functioning in a very, very seamlessly held harmonious manner with what is within, interacting with, influencing, and being informed by what is outside. And so we also explore here the connections between the Jnanendriya, Karmendriya, Tanmatra, Bhuta, and how the dominance of Sattva Guna in all of these, with Rajas and Tamas functioning to the limit essential, and how Prana can also be worked here. Prana becomes a fundamental, I would say, the most valuable tool or the secret key in yoga that will unlock all of these and bring them together so that there is some kind of a synergetic functioning. These will be explored both in lecture as also in practice. Further, going into the mind itself, what is it that clouds the mind? The kleshas, according to the Yoga Sutra. And so I will spend a little time tracing this, because there are some very important aspects that are presented in the second chapter of the Yoga Sutra about the kleshas. Fundamentally, avidya is our ignorance of the nature of the Atma that is within. So Patanjali tells us it is a wrong understanding, an avidya khyati of nitya, anitya, shucham, ashucham, dukkha, sukha, atma, anatma. The wrong understanding or the misunderstanding of knowing the nature of the self is where our problems begin. But increasingly, when that happens, the ahamkara takes over and causes us to identify with the body, with bodily sensations, and therefore from there, an attachment to the perpetuation of what is seen as pleasurable for this body, mind, senses complex as raga. And simultaneously, you see that there is also you could say a revulsion or a hatred for any situation that takes away or undermines this gratification or this sense, so-called perceived pleasure. And so how raga and dvesha play significant roles. And because of this, by now we have become so very detached from our core. And naturally, we cling on. There is so much to be afraid of. And therefore, abhinivesha, because we are wrongly identifying our limited pleasures that we receive from the Indriya Vishaya as the very source of our joy. But they are highly, you could say, they're highly volatile. Here today, gone tomorrow, with absolutely no certainty of endurance. And so, repeatedly, we cling on to people, to places, to relationships, to situations. And naturally, when they change, we suffer. And this cycle again perpetuates fear. There is great fear for death, fear of death, anxiety to be alive, to be perpetual. And this loop goes on infinitely. This is how Patanjali presents the kleshas. And therefore, it is essential that the hold that the kleshas have on the mind has to be reduced. Only then can the mind assert itself, can the sattva dominance of the mind enable transformations to occur. And those transformations are inevitably contributing towards wellness. So you have a similar pathway of destruction, like you have the kleshas in the Yoga Sutra. The Bhagavad Gita very beautifully delineates a downward spiral where Krishna explains to Arjuna, Sangat Sanjayate Kama, Kamat Krodho Bijayate, Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha, Sammohat Smriti Vibramaha, Smriti Bhramshat Buddhinasha, Buddhinashat Pranashyati. And so, this is I would say this is again, there are so many treasures in the Bhagavad Gita. This is one that we'll explore where our situation begins with a certain sangha. It could be with a person, place, with an habit, whatever it is. And with that, immediately there is a need to recreate this because that sangha is seen as pleasurable. We want more of it and avoid anything that changes it. And so that sangha leads to karma. Naturally, when things don't go as we expect, when things change or when there is loss, there is grief giving rise to anger, instant blinding. There is sammoha, and where there is sammoha, there is also, you could say, a realignment of our memory. Sometimes it can be a body's protective mechanism of deliberately blocking out certain events, selective amnesia, remembering events other than they occurred, so that we try to protect ourselves. And very often these have a lot of psychological implications in terms of how we relate to others, our judgments, our prejudices, our biases, all these are, you could say, aggregating. And naturally, as these peak, as this gains momentum, we start losing clarity in terms of what we are saying, what we are doing, how we behave. And from that, the next step is only pranasha, says Krishna, that it can be very, very destructive, chaotic. This is exactly what happens within us as well. It happens at multiple dimensions, at a physical, physiological, and also at an emotional level. And therefore, to be in control, at which point can you be in control is at the beginning. What sangha are we forming? Satsanga. And what is that satsanga for the body is how we will explore ahara, the sangha of ahara, the sangha of vihara, the sangha of achara and vichara, fundamental pillars. Of course, other things, other practices that will enable a smooth sangha, you could say a functional sangha to begin with, and how we can try to therefore change this trajectory to some extent through the use of holistic approaches. As similar to this downward spiral, Patanjali is also speaking of the antarayas in the Yoga Sutra. Apologies, this is the wrong number. It's Sutra 1.30, where he speaks of Vyadhi first as the first antaraya. Vyadhi, Sthana, Samshaya, Pramada, Alasya, Virati, Bhranti Darshana, Alabdha Bhumikatva, Anavasti Tatvani, Chitta Vikshepaha, Te Antarayaha. And so it starts with Vyadhi. Each of these, of course, I will be developing in the course, where according to Vyasa's commentary, Vyadhi is presented as Dhatu, Rasa, Karana, Vaishamyam. Imbalance in the fundamental constituents of the body. And there is a clear connection that these are not isolated antarayas. From Vyadhi, Sthana, from Sthana, Samshaya, from Samshaya, Pramada, Alasya, Avirati, and then this idea of, they just keep perpetuating. They become, they start manifesting in so many ways, leading to an overall lethargy, heaviness, indolence of the body, and therefore clouding because of our doubts, our fear, lack of shraddha, inability to persevere, to even follow a certain goal, even if it is just a goal for our own health, and therefore even inability to sustain. But the importance of putting an end to these loops is very important from the perspective of facilitating holistic wellness. Further, Sutra 1.31. My apologies, both these slides, the numbering is wrong, 1.30, 1.31. These are the accompanying, Vikshepa Sahabhuvaha, says Patanjali. These are accompanying symptoms to these disturbances, to the Chitta Vikshepa. And these are important. Dukkha, which is any sense of uneasiness, restriction, sorrow, tightness. Daurmanasya, negative thought, depression, dejection. Angam, Ejayatva, overall weakness, debility of the body. And Shwasa, Prashwasa, unsteadiness, you could say even unregulated breath. And all of these manifest, and you see that there is a manifestation at a Dukkha Daurmanasya is at a deep emotional level. Angamejayatva is at a physical, physiological level, and Shwasa Prashwasa is at the vital level. And so these, you could say the antarayas of the mind also make a significant impact at all dimensions of the system. And this has to be addressed, and Patanjali shows us the pathway. And so these will be explored through practices. Now, when we speak of our health and wellness, we see wellness or health as arogyam. And so roga being disease and arogyam, it is, you could say that one part of it is, yes, the absence or the prevention of disease, but also it is a state of the mind that, yes, there might be certain challenges that the body faces. Some of it is natural with aging. Some of it might be genetic in nature. Some are karmic in nature also. But nevertheless, can I still maintain a state of wellness as far as my mind is concerned, as far as my thoughts are concerned? And therein lies this, I would say, the heart of this course in terms of exploring what is this integral well-being. It may not be at a peripheral level. There might be aches, there might be pains. How am I coping with it? Are there systems that I can use to alter this situation? And so we will explore the multiple factors, because one part of it is, of course, individual constitution, where I live, what I eat, the seasonal influences on me, my work, lifestyle, etc. But there are so many factors. You see, physical aspects, cognitive, sensorial aspects, emotional aspects, work related, the vritti, the occupational aspects, diet, lifestyle, ahara, vihara, vyayama. Increasingly, I would say these three, the environmental aspects, changes occurring in the environment where there is leaching of chemicals in the soil, water sources are polluted, high degree of microplastics in our food sources, the air that we breathe is no longer conducive for good health, especially in many places, many countries across the world, especially in the north of India. I think this is a significant challenge that we're facing with regard to respiratory distress. This is one thing. This is on the one hand, we see that there is a lot of unpredictability in weather patterns and so on. But equally, I would say dangerous are our addiction to social media, the kind of interactions that happen on such platforms, and digital influences as well, because these are impacting at multiple levels. They are impacting at a physical level in terms of, you could say, body structure changing, cervical alignment is changing, there is a change in the neck and the back. Obviously these are fundamental organs, but there are also very, very obvious physical impacts, whether it is affecting the vision or other sensory functions, or even the way we engage with others, maintaining eye contact, developing healthy relationships with people, live in-person relationships, how much we depend on these virtual platforms, how false these are. I think these are very, very important for us to look at. And therefore, how best, because it's not that one can eliminate these from our life, how can we work with these? How can we turn them to our favor? But for that, some amount of self-discipline, I would say self-regulation is needed in terms of managing all this. And one very viable system is yoga, and yoga especially in its application as yoga therapy. So because here the one thing I want to point out is, when we speak of yoga, the most I would say a misconception is associating yoga with simply the practice of postures, sometimes very, very complex, challenging postures, which majority are not even capable of attempting. And that, unfortunately, also most yoga promotions also carry visuals of people who are young, who are fit, who are very, very supple. Yoga is for all, and yoga has to be adapted. We must remember that there are techniques, there are variety, so many asanas, but it is also important context. What is the context in which the rishis of the past, the yogis of the past, worked with their body in that time? Where are we now? What is our diet, lifestyle, etc.? And so it is essential, I would say, that the tools of yoga are adapted, and adapted to the level of the individual. This is the hallmark of the Krishnamacharya approach, where both Krishnamacharya and Desikacharya were very emphatic that yoga cannot be an exclusive sadhana in its present evolution, that you leave aside the philosophical implications, that it is a pathway to attaining kaivalyam. All this one has to set aside. This is later. Here and now, when we are looking at basic well-being, we have to understand application, understand the function of a technique, and adapt it to the individual. And so they were very, in fact, Krishnamacharya is known to have said, the only prerequisite needed to practice yoga is the fact that you're alive, that you're breathing. And therein lies immense adaptability and immense potential in these tools. And I would say that we are very, very underusing the knowledge and the application of both yoga and Ayurveda. Even at the KYM, sometimes most people come to us as a last resort, or because they're doctors. Now doctors are telling them, but even there, it's very limited in which condition they suggest yoga. When someone is having, say, some psychological issues, strangely, we have doctors prescribing and saying, please teach them meditation. This is a paradox. In fact, it's sometimes one wonders, whether we laugh or cry at this, because that mind that is going through so much disturbance is not even ready for meditation. But they just give us these prescriptions, but then we start working at a much basic level, at a body level. We try to work with breath integration, and then little by little we are actually seeing the changes that manifest in simple day-to-day tasks in relationships. And I think therein lies much of the unexplored potential of modern day yoga that has to be adapted to provide some measure of health and wellness. The same goes for Ayurveda as well. And we must remember here that at core, yoga believes that mind is the source and the solution to all our problems. And the aim of yoga eventually is to transcend our suffering, to transcend dukkha, so that we are no longer identifying with that and we realize the nature of the Atma within. But in this process, that's a lofty goal. Kaivalyam is a very lofty goal. It's not something that can be attained like that. It's just not possible. We need to start where we are, and therefore it is through the body that one can first fulfill our swadharma. First we need to understand our guna, what is the swakarma, the swadharma, accordingly engage in actions that are supportive. Only little by little you can fulfill our aspirations, your responsibility, through understanding the body, the breath, the senses, and what empowers it. Only then we can go to higher sadhana, and therein lies the benefit, I would say, of yoga. Now, from a health perspective, to put it very simply, there are only two possible situations that typically when we are exposed to a stressor. This is, I think all of us are familiar with this as the fight or flight response. Unfortunately, the fight or flight response that we are speaking of is a response that happens in a life-threatening situation where the option is to fight or run away. But our battlefield is no longer there. Our battlefield is inside. The kshetra is our body, our mind. And therefore, this is where this battle has to be fought. And here the fight or flight response is typically contraindicative, because the more the stress and the tension, the more we allow it to build up, the more the sympathetic nervous activity, the more the stress hormones that are released. And this aggravates everything. Whatever is a possibility, or if there is a mild manifestation of some condition, is immediately aggravated by stress, leading overall to a situation we call pathogenesis or negative health complications. And the opposite is when we learn to control, when we try to regulate. But you can't regulate the stressor. What can be regulated is only the mind, the body, and the senses. And when we learn to work with these together, then the pathway is to salutogenesis or positive affirmative health. And the pathway is very clear. The Yoga Sutra is so clear, from dukkha to sukha, daurmanasya to saumanasya, from angame jayatva to angasthairya. These are essential for our well-being. And the pathway is dirgha sukshma prana. Prana holds the key. And when prana is appropriately used and adapted, then much can be done to promote overall wellness. And you see that there are so many benefits. When we look at the tools, you see asana from an alignment perspective, fitness, flexibility, strength, stamina. Pranayama increases available prana, giving us better vitality. It improves when the breath rate comes down, naturally there is a slight regulation of pulse rate, leading to longevity. We see this, there are many references about how long breath rate leads to longevity. Also, the role of breath in reducing mental agitation and restlessness, and how the working with body, breath, mind together creates a sort of a delay between our trigger and response, allowing us to process better, to reflect, and therefore to manage situations with confidence and with clarity. We have tools of relaxation, adapted tools of nyasam from the ritual tradition, simple movements, simple finger placements, simple adaptations of mantra or other shlokas, visualization, bhavana, multiple tools that can be used, which will be explored here. And so we see that, I think this is again a very well-known definition from the Ayurveda perspective, that health is a sustained state of balance. And balance doesn't mean that everything is equal. Balanced with regard to one's innate prakriti. So Ayurveda says samadosha, samagni, samadhatu, samamalakriya. Everything is in balance in accordance to an individual's prakriti, this alone is not enough, because whatever disrupts that balance has to be addressed so that some kind of a balance is resumed. Prasanna atma indriya manaha swastha ityabhidhiyate. It is also important to facilitate this pleasant disposition at the antakarana level as well. The whole system is in resonance like a very well-tuned instrument. This is the purpose of how we use the tools in yoga and Ayurveda. And so in summation, this is the journey that we are looking at, where essentially there is this battle between dukkha and sukha. Dukkha and sukha are always, they are like waves on an ocean. And we are constantly going through these, you could say, this very tumultuous shifts between experiences of dukkha, experiences of sukha. But Ananda is at a deep level. This, what we are speaking of, integral wellness is Ananda. It is settling. It is serene. It is a state of calmness, of quietness, of acceptance, of contentment, gratitude, sense of fulfillment when it comes to purpose. When can that happen? That can happen only the more and more we are in alignment or in connection to what is within, because that is the goal of yoga. The more we separate, you see the manifestation as dukkha, sukha, and then from dukkha into disease. From there, it's not a far leap, and that cycle continues. And so the essential need to move from center to periphery, when you empower our realization, when we realize what lies within, from there, you can see that one can facilitate wellness at the Panchamaya level. But when we deploy the tools, typically we move from the periphery to the center. We work with physical, physiological, cognitive, emotional tools before going deeper. But when there is a transformation, that transformation simply floods the system, leading to an overall perception of wellness, which is qualitative. It cannot be marked by simply biomedical readings or any such thing, but your state of mind and to what extent there is acceptance, connection, alignment, surrender. All of these are, I would say, essential to facilitating wellness. So let me stop here at this point. This is roughly the areas that we will cover, much more in fact, but this is just literally a bird's eye. I'll take your questions at this point.
Thank you so much, Nityaji. That was so amazing. There were points when I just getting lost and I forgot that we are in a webinar. It was really, really amazing. As a standalone talk itself, it was so enriching. So there are questions posed by two audience members.
Yeah, I will just check this out.
Yes.
What is the role of Tantra, Mantra? Mantra is also covered. Japa I'm covering. But please remember, it's not a course on mantra. And therefore, I will be touching on the use of mantra from an adaptation perspective of how the tradition, how chanting can be used as a tool to support breath, to support bhavana. And for those who are serious, then mantra sadhana can be done. But then that is the subject of yet another course. Could you explain what nadis are in which the 5 pranas flow? Are they psychosomatic or real? They cannot be found in the body, but they're definitely not psychosomatic either. They're not imagined. And unfortunately, I can't give you a detailed answer here because this platform is limited for now. For today, this is intended only as an introductory talk. But the nadis are a very, very meticulously researched system as far as our literature goes. Our traditional yogic literature expounds in detail. And so we must accept the fact that I think we are only now catching up to the subtlety of perception and the subtlety of understanding, because the mapping of the nadis itself is a remarkable endeavor that these yogis have done. And so I would say, rather than from a position of disbelief or distrust, can we accept it and then see where we are yet to catch up from a modern understanding? Because unfortunately, the instruments that we have are not instruments that yet measure nadi at the level of nadi, but it's very subtle. We feel it when there is a blockage. And so possibly through certain practices that experience can be gained. some texts where Nadi Jnana is explained. There are many. Ayurvedic literature gives you plenty of information. So I think enough content is available in the World Wide Web as well. Is there book on Arogyam? There's no one book on Arogyam, because it's not something that can be taught in a book. I think as a concept itself, it is holistic, and we need to look at it from multiple perspectives. That's the point of this course, that I'm not basing it on one book. I'm basing it on multiple texts, and I am layering it with my learned experiences under my teachers. And I stand here representing the tradition of Krishnamacharya and Desikacharya, trying to bring their work and their insights in the realm of health and wellness into the course content itself. Sometimes I've been frustrated on my role as a practitioner due to lack of people's understanding. Oh, thank you. So much validation here. Thank you, Sachin. Why don't I write one? Hopefully sometime.
In fact, I would like to chime in here. Very good feedback, actually. So quite a few of INDICA courses are a result of certain books or research that has been conducted by scholars or academicians, and we've coursified their thesis or books. And then there are courses that we specially curated, and the course material has resulted into books. Yes. So Nritya ji is one of our finest faculties, and she's already conducted 3 courses. So I'm sure, and you just put it out publicly, and I guess now we are sending it out to the universe, that we will convince her to come up not with just one book, with volumes in the near future.
Certainly, in the near future.
No, I don't want to really put you in the spotlight, but this is something that I also would want to see happen.
It is something that I've also been keeping in mind. In fact, my Yoga 360 talk has been entirely transcribed. Yeah, it's ready. I just need to work on it a little bit.
Yeah, so there are 2 audience members who have raised their hands, and then there are a few questions in the Q&A box. Looking at the time, I will just, Bhaskarji, yes, you will get the recorded presentation. We will upload it on our YouTube channel of INDICA, and we will also mail you a recording of this. So anybody and everybody who have registered for this particular session, even if they did not attend it live, we will send you all a mail which will have the link of our YouTube video. That is one. Sachin ji, could you please send all your queries at reachout@indica.courses? That should help. Then we have, what are the dates for the next? So currently, Prasiddha ji, we have had only 3 sessions so far. So you're welcome to enroll now also, and you can easily catch up on the past recordings on the learning portal, and you'll have access for a year. So that is there. Then yeah, so Bhaskar ji and Sudhir ji have raised their hand for quite a while. So before we move to the other comments or questions in the Q&A box, I would first unmute Sudhir ji. I would request him to keep his questions short because we are running short on time. And thereafter, I'll invite Bhaskar ji. So Sudhir ji, I am unmuting you. 1 second. And I will lower your hand. So, Sudhir ji, could you please...
Sessions are recorded. For those who can't make it live, sessions are recorded, uploaded on the portal, available for up to a year.
Yes.
You have my videos as also my slides. There may be weekly assignments. Sometimes I might give assignments, sometimes I might give practices, sometimes I might just ask students to reflect.
Good. Am I audible, madam?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, Sudhir ji, yes.
Thank you. I have learned that the Atma is within the 5 codes of consciousness, okay? Pranamaya and etc. There are the 5 layers, and the Atma is within that. So, mind is mind, the breath is mind, but if we say that the Atma is mind, how far it is justified?
सुधीर जी, आप अपना प्रश्न हिंदी में भी पूछ सकते हैं. हमें ना आवाज पूरी नहीं आ रही है आपकी. Could you please repeat the question? हाँ.
ये जो 5 कोर्स है
जी,
हाँ, 5 कोर्स के अंदर आत्मा रहती है एज पर वैदिक और ये आपका जो शिक्षाएं हैं
जी.
तो मैं माइंड को तो मैं जानता हूँ, मेरा वो मेरा है, प्राण को भी मैं जानता हूँ ये मेरा है। तो आत्मा को हम अपन जैसे बोलते हैं कि ये मेरी आत्मा है, तो हाउ फार वी आर जस्टिफाइड, बिकॉज द आत्मा इज अ पार्ट ऑफ द इटर्निटी। ये जो है, समझ में आया मेरा क्वेश्चन?
आप ये कह रहे हैं कि अभी नित्या जी ने एक स्लाइड दिखाई थी जिसमें वो उन्होंने पंचकोश वो दिखाया आपको, 5 लेवल्स उन्होंने दिखाई आपको, राइट? वो जो पेरिफेरी से कोर की बात कर रही थी, जहां तक मैंने समझा, एंड ऑब्वियसली नित्या जी विल करेक्ट मी इफ आई एम रॉन्ग, इज दैट जर्नी generally begins from out towards the inner core, and when we reach the center, तब हमें पता चलता है कि ये जो बाहर का है ये सब, this is like a covering, and what it is at our core, that awakening happens, and then we realize that we are not this that we identify with. Is that correct, Ritya ji?
Yeah, yes, to some extent. Of course, it's a philosophical model. Again, I've only given you the idea that has to be developed further.
तो सुधीर जी, मेरा ये निवेदन होगा कि आप इस क्लास में एनरोल कर ही लें, और फिर उसमें आप कई प्रश्न पूछ पाएंगे और अच्छे से पूछ पाएंगे। थोड़ा कुछ इसमें आवाज थोड़ी क्लियर नहीं आ रही, तो इसलिए पूरी तरह से हम ले नहीं पाए आपका प्रश्न, बट आई होप यू विल फाइंड द आंसर व्हेन यू जॉइन अस।
So I have covered this idea of Atma pervading and within is already covered it's there in the course.
So now I am letting Bhaskar ji ask his question. Bhaskar ji, if you could just quickly.
Yeah. Namaste, ma'am. Namaste, INDICA. I would like to thank you so much for giving this opportunity to share something, but I would like to utilize this valuable time to say most of the important 2 points. Mostly first point is, really, ma'am, this is not a content, this is not a information, this is your spiritual enlightenment and spiritual transformation, ma'am. Really greatest session. I don't know how to appreciate this one. I am lucky to have this, and great, ma'am. Actually, I'm in the traveling, even though I'm keenly attending this session. My prayers, and I would like to listen this more and more, which I have to enlighten myself. That's what I requested this presentation. But really to understand, really frankly to understand, one life cannot be sufficient. And second point, ma'am, really INDICA, but the very great and greatest sessions is conducting regularly. I'm attending to INDICA, but I don't know how to appreciate this INDICA also. I'm keenly awaiting, like, which sessions when you conducted, especially these INDICA courses. I'm checking my mails. My heartfelt thanks to the INDICA. Please continue these type of highlight sessions, ma'am. But I am missing some of the paid versions what I could not pay. But anyway, I'm utilizing this opportunity, and my heartfelt thanks to the presenters and the INDICA. Thank you so much, ma'am. That's what.
Thank you so much, Bhaskar Garu. It is such appreciation that really keeps us going. So our faculty like Nitya ji are our strength, and the appreciation and encouragement from our audience and our students and our learners like you is also a source of great inspiration and strength, and that keeps us going. So we would love to have you in our courses. I just want to repeat it, and I guess today I did not say it. We also offer grants, we also offer scholarships, and for any learner who has enrolled in 3 or more courses of INDICA, we offer even complimentary courses. So please feel free to reach out to us at reachout@indica.courses, and we'll make sure that if you feel that you're not able to afford, we keep giving grants and scholarships. In addition to that, I Am Buddha Foundation also sponsors at least 1 scholarship per course. So feel free to reach out and do join this one, because this one seems to have resonated a lot with you, Bhaskar ji. Last comment or question from Sachin Shudraji. Sachin ji, I am unmuting you. Please come forth. Sachin ji, could you unmute your...
I'm unmuted.
Oh yeah, hi. Namaste.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to say to ma'am for your talk today. Just awesome. Living in Canada, where it's minus 30 right now with the weather, quite tamasic and slow. working out here on the day of solstice, the winter celebration day in Western Canada, it's like pure fruits, your words. And I'm a therapist that is now starting to work in Canada with psychedelics therapy with doctors for people who experience trauma and severe PTSD. Reviewing and listening to your words today on your presentation give me extreme confidence in just what the societies require for daily routine and management of the mind of people. I cannot mention it anymore, and I feel very blessed to just hear your words today, because it gives me motivation to continue the Vedantic tradition from my roots, living somewhere which is not exposed to our tradition so much, and these fruits of wisdom. So you've touched my spirit very high today and encouraged to stay motivated. Thank you, ma'am, very much. Awesome.
That is so wonderful. I mean, Nritya ji, I began with appreciation, and you can see the audience members. This whole space, we have been energized by what has been shared today. And just reiterating what you said, this is just a sample of what this course has to offer. And essentially, this course is more like a practice. There is theory, of course. And when you implement what our wonderful erudite faculty trains you in, there will be an elevation, and you will really be surprised at who you are at the end of the program, is all that I can say. So I think we are at 7:07, and we have taken a lot of your time, Nritya ji, and for that we are grateful. Any concluding words before we move to the last part?
Nothing specific. It's just that I wish this reaches more people. There's so much that one can truly contribute to. Increasingly, we see that medical care is very expensive, and to look at a cure after the fact, can we start looking before? Can we look at preemptive approaches? There's such a wealth in our knowledge systems. If we'll just be open to that and try to imbibe at least some percentage of this in our lives, I think so much that we are suffering can be avoided, and this can be accessible to many who may not be able to afford. Primary healthcare is a big challenge in every country, and so there are very, very simple economic ways, simple systems that can be used without spending very much. And so this is the vision that my teachers had, and therefore I continue with that vision and that prayer that more benefit from these traditions.
So very well said, Nritya ji. Thank you so much. I really hope that the audience members who have participated in this live session today talk about it, share the enrollment link with other learners who they think might benefit from it. Thank you so very much, Nritya ji, once again. Thank you to everybody who registered for the webinar and you attended it. Thank you to my colleagues at INDICA and INDICA courses. And we will be back with another overview webinar soon. Follow us on our social media and do bookmark our website, indica.courses. Namaste. Have a great evening, everyone. Namaskar.